This video is brought to you by The Sports Letter. How would you like to become a sports expert in less than 5 minutes per day? The Sports Letter cuts through the noise to deliver you the need-to-know sports news straight to your inbox every weekday morning. If you sign up now, you'll get the chance to win free tickets, gear, and more. Join the more than 100,000 subscribers who start their day with sports and never miss a highlight again.
What game? They played the last game here. This walk down these steps was taken by some of the greatest athletes who've ever performed. But that's all over now for this place. 55,000 seats have emptied out for the last time. And all this place has left is memories. But what memories?
When the historic Polo Grounds was demolished in 1964, players, writers, and fans reflected on the legacy of the renowned ballpark. Since its inception in 1876, the Polo Grounds had played host to 3 different stadiums, 3 Major League Baseball teams, and a plethora of Hall of Famers, including Christy Mathewson, Babe Ruth, and Willie Mays. So when the Phillies defeated the Mets 5-1 on September 18, 1963, the 1,752 spectators in attendance could boast that they had borne witness to the final baseball game ever played at one of the sport's most legendary parks. Except that wasn't actually the last game played at the Polo Grounds. On October 12, 1963, a group of Major League players gathered on that hallowed site for one final contest. Though it would be little noted in most histories of baseball, this matchup brought together some of the greatest players to ever set foot on the diamond for a momentous occasion, the first ever Latino All-Star Game. From the perspective of today's game, where about 30% of Major League rosters are made up of players of a Latino background, the celebration of Latin American heritage may seem commonplace, but in 1963, it was revolutionary. For nearly a century leading up to this event, Latino players had been forced to grapple with their oftentimes unique position in a sport which was otherwise neatly segregated along the color line. Here's history professor Adrian Burgos Jr. on the subject.
Latinos had played on both sides of the color line. From 1902 to 1947, we had 53 Latinos that appeared in Major League Baseball. During that same time, you had over 240 Latinos that played in the Negro Leagues and leagues that preceded it, which we all now call Negro Leagues.
For Latino baseball players, entrance to Major League Baseball was almost entirely dependent on whether they could pass as a quote-unquote white player, like Luis Castro in 1902 or Rafael Almeida and Armando Marsans in 1911. But those who couldn't were essentially left with 2 options: stay in their home country or play in the Negro Leagues. Even those who did make it to the majors faced discrimination from businesses, opposing teams, and sometimes even their own teammates. Rival pitchers would throw at them, dining cars would deny them service, and their fellow players would refuse to room with them. For Latino players, life in the major leagues was riddled with hardships and triumphs alike, and beginning in 1963, these stories would be forever immortalized in a brand new Latin American Hall of Fame. As with the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, the Latin American Hall of Fame's inaugural class was made up of some of the most legendary players in the history of the sport: Adolfo Luque, Hiram Bithorn, Francisco Coimbre, and Pedro Cepeda. The first Latino pitcher to reach the majors, Adolfo Luque's MLB career spanned 20 years with the Braves, Reds, Dodgers, and Giants. He led the league in wins in 1923 and became the first Latino pitcher to pitch in the World Series in 1919. By the time he retired at the age of 44, he had set the record for wins by a Latino pitcher, a record he would hold for several decades. This was enough for the Cuban-born hurler to earn the nickname the Pride of Havana. The first player from Puerto Rico to play Major League Baseball, Hiram Bithorn made his debut for the Chicago Cubs in 1942, and while his big league career lasted only 4 seasons, his impact on the game can be felt to this day. Carl Bithorn Jr. summed up his great-granduncle's effect thusly: to have somebody that is a relative of yours open the floodgates, so to speak, to players in the major leagues is definitely significant. Knowing that I'm related to someone that was the first, there's only one first, so that's unbelievable. It's a great feeling. While Adolfo Luque and Hiram Bithorn were able to play in the major leagues, Francisco Pancho Coimbra and Pedro Parucho Cepeda were not, on account of their darker skin tone. Coimbra, a star in the Puerto Rican leagues, joined the New York Cubans of the Negro Leagues in 1940. During his 4 years in the Negro Leagues, he hit .339, good for 5th among all professional baseball players with at least 500 plate appearances during that period. Roberto Clemente, perhaps the most iconic Puerto Rican player in baseball history, said that Pancho Coimbra was a better player than himself. Unlike Coimbra, Pedro Parucho Cepeda spent his entire career in Puerto Rico and became a national legend in the process. He played all over the field, and his exploits at the plate led many to dub him the Babe Ruth of Puerto Rico. From 1938 to 1950, he hit over 400 multiple times and won back-to-back batting titles in 38 and 39. Despite the fact that his star would have most definitely translated to the United States, he vehemently refused, well aware of the racism that he would likely have to suffer. Pedro's son, Hall of Famer Orlando Cepeda, recalled the first time he ever saw his father play, as part of an 18-inning game that featured Josh Gibson behind the plate. So when it came time to honor him before the 1963 Latino All-Star Game, it brought tears to his eyes. Having my dad involved that day, along with some great Latino players, I felt very proud to be the son of Parucho Cepeda. Although a physical building for the Latin American Hall of Fame was never built, the honor was no less significant. In 1963, there were no Latino players in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and there wouldn't be until Clemente's death 10 years later. So, they figured, if the league wasn't going to honor them, they'd do it themselves. For all the lead-up to the occasion, which took place a week after the conclusion of the 1963 World Series, there was still a game to be played. The plan going in was to have 2 teams, representing the American League and National League, face off against each other, with each position being filled by a big league Latino ball player. However, there were a few complications. To start, some positions didn't have big league Latino players, so they had to get a bit creative. Cuno Barragan was the son of Mexican immigrants and suited up behind the plate for the NL despite having only 1 at-bat that year for the Cubs. Also on the NL roster was Joe Pignatano, who as an Italian-American AAA player was neither Latino nor a big leaguer, but he was there, so he played. Prior to the game, the players engaged in a home run contest in which the American League prevailed on the backs of the Twins' Vic Power and the Yankees' Hector Lopez. There was also live music, headlined by icons La Lupe, Tito Puente, and Tito Rodriguez. But the feature attraction was undoubtedly the players. Among the on-field talent were 4 future Hall of Famers, 3 MVPs, and a collection of Latino superstars unlike any that had been seen before. Roberto Clemente would be the National League captain. Only 9 seasons into his illustrious career, Clemente's numbers were already enough to make him an all-time great among Puerto Rican players. What he would do over his next 9 made him a legend. Over the course of his 18 years in Major League Baseball, Roberto Clemente was a 15-time All-Star, a record 12-time Gold Glove winner, and a 2-time World Series champion. He averaged 200 hits a season and had a career OPS plus of 130. In his final regular season at-bat on September 30th, 1972, he stroked a double off of John Matlack of the New York Mets for his 3,000th career hit. He would be killed in a plane crash that December on his way to deliver earthquake relief to Nicaragua. Led by Clemente, the National League lineup was a powerhouse, sporting stars Orlando Cepeda and Felipe Alou. Despite a career in which he hit .297 with 379 home runs, it somehow took 25 years for Orlando Cepeda to receive his long-overdue spot in the Hall of Fame. Over 17 years in the majors, Cepeda garnered 7 All-Star nods, a World Series ring, and is along with Albert Pujols one of only 2 players in MLB history to win both the Rookie of the Year and Most Valuable Player awards unanimously. When he was finally selected by the Veterans Committee, Cepeda became the second native Puerto Rican after Clemente to ever be enshrined in Cooperstown. While Felipe Alou's career may have lacked the accolades of Clemente's and Cepeda's, his impact on baseball was no less significant. As a player, the Dominican-born Alou manned the outfield for 17 years, racking up 3 All-Star selections and a handful of MVP votes to go along with his 2,101 hits and 206 home runs. As a manager, he led the Montreal Expos to some of their best years in the early 90s and the San Francisco Giants to a 100-win season in 2003. Taken as a whole, Felipe Alou has had one of the most accomplished baseball lives of anyone in the game. Taking the mound for the National League was the 1963 MLB wins leader and Giants star Juan Marichal. At 25 years old, Marichal was only beginning what would be a storied major league career. His 243 wins would be the most by a pitcher born in the Dominican Republic until he was tied in 2018 by Bartolo Colon. Over the course of 16 seasons, Marichal was a 9-time All-Star, won at least 25 games 3 times, and struck out over 200 batters 6 times. 20 years after the Latino All-Star Game was played, Juan Marichal would be voted into the Hall of Fame, appearing on 83.7% of ballots in 1983. On the American League side, captained by Hector Lopez, was an assembly of established icons and burgeoning stars alike. Their leadoff batter was future Hall of Famer and MLB steals leader Luis Aparicio. The Venezuelan-born Aparicio, along with the Dodgers' Maury Wills, was credited with reviving the popularity of the stolen base in the 50s and 60s. Between his rookie year in 1956 and 1964, he would lead the American League in steals for 9 consecutive seasons. He led all of Major League Baseball in steals 5 times, including a 3-year stretch from 60 to 62. At the time of his retirement, he held the all-time record for games played, assists, and double plays by a shortstop. Born in Cuba in 1925, Manny Minoso had already been a professional baseball player for nearly 2 decades at the time of the Latino All-Star Game. What they didn't know at the time was that it would be another 17 years until he would play his final MLB game. Over 18 seasons split between the Negro Leagues and MLB, Minoso routinely finished towards the top of the league in hits, doubles, triples, stolen bases, and MVP voting. Although his performance during his prime was enough to make him one of the most respected Latino players ever, Minoso was also known for a pair of publicity stunts in which he appeared for the White Sox in 1976 and 1980, at the age of 50 and 54 respectively. The latter appearance would make him the 3rd oldest player to ever come to bat in a major league game. Signed out of Cuba as an 18-year-old in 1958, Zoilo Versales manned second base for the American League during the game. Versales had led the league in triples in 1963, earning himself his first career All-Star selection in the process. But he would be most remembered for his 1965 season, in which he would lead the league in doubles, triples, and runs, all while playing Gold Glove caliber shortstop for the AL champion Minnesota Twins. This breakout year made him the near-unanimous AL MVP, beating out his fellow Latino All-Star Game teammate Tony Oliva for the honor. Although he would go on to have a stellar MLB career, in which he would garner a Rookie of the Year award, 8 All-Star nods, and MVP votes in 8 consecutive seasons, Tony Oliva was a virtual nobody in 1963. In his first 2 years in the league, he had accrued a grand total of 19 plate appearances, so he was hesitant to even speak to many of the established stars like Clemente and Marichal. However, his performance would speak for itself. On the 50th anniversary of the Latino All-Star Game, Orlando Cepeda was asked how he felt going into the event. It didn't matter that it was for charity and that it wasn't a real All-Star Game. When you put on your uniform, you played hard and you tried even harder to win. And that's what everybody did in that game. With Juan Marichal on the mound and a lineup featuring Clemente, Alou, and Cepeda, many onlookers had the National League pegged as the odds-on favorite to win, and they got to work early proving those predictions true. Marichal pitched 4 innings of shutout ball, striking out 6 before handing it off to Pittsburgh's Al McBean. In addition to 4 more shutout innings, McBean nearly added an inside-the-parker to his stat line. In the 6th inning, he roped a ball 400 feet into left field, but was thrown out by Hector Lopez trying to stretch a triple into a home run. For as dominant as the National League was early on, the American League wasn't going to go down without a fight. Losing 5-0 going into the top of the 9th, the AL lineup attempted a last-minute comeback, scoring 2 runs off of the Mets' Eduardo Bauta. Tony Oliva was credited with one of the RBI, finishing the day 2 for 5 with a double, but the rally would come up short and the National League would win the game 5-2. All in all, the event had raised thousands of dollars for retired Latino players and the Hispanic American Baseball Federation, and had attracted over 14,000 fans. As for the players, they each went home that day having earned a grand total of $175 for the occasion. Unfortunately, while the Latino All-Star Game was originally meant to be an annual event, scheduling conflicts and the inability to find a suitable venue meant that the 1963 game would go down as the only one of its kind. Nevertheless, it was an extraordinary milestone for Latino baseball players, and a signal to the league that they were willing to do whatever it would take to be seen. By 1967, Latino players would make up over 10% of the league, with 8 being invited to the MLB All-Star Game that year. But while the Latino All-Star Game was a sign of the progress that had been made, there was still a ways to go. Against his wishes, Roberto Clemente was still referred to as Bob on his baseball cards, and it wouldn't be until 1969 that MLB would have its first Latino manager in Preston Gomez of the San Diego Padres. Today, with Latino players making up nearly a third of the league, Major League Baseball has made strides in recognizing their contributions to the sport. But as has been demonstrated in recent months, there is always more to be done. In 2013, Cepeda was asked if he would like to see the Latino All-Star Game make a return. There are so many great Latino players these days that are like Pedro Martinez, Juan Marichal, Felipe Alou, those great Latino ball players. You never saw them. If you played the game, we'd have a great opportunity to spend some time with them, and they would also like to spend some time with us. If you're looking for more videos like this one, Stark Raving Sports has a series on baseball in the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico which I highly recommend. And let me know what you thought about this video. Do you think they should hold another event like this one? If so, who would you like to see play? Leave a comment below and subscribe so you can be the first to catch the next video.